All right, so today I want to talk to you about Power Platform governance and some tips around administering the Power Platform, specifically about DLP policies. We're going to see what they are, how they work, how to stack them or combine them, and one tip that is going to be very useful for you if you want to have a global DLP to block all the unwanted connectors in your organization. Right, so I've prepped a couple of slides for you, and we're going to see first how data loss prevention policies work. And if you're new to the topic, basically, data loss prevention policies allow us to block or control the usage of certain connectors in an environment. So, for example, you've got an environment where you have some citizen developers or a vendor working there, and you want to limit the connectors they have access to when they work with Power Automate or Power Apps. So, to do that, you will need a DLP policy, a data loss prevention policy. Now, the way they work is that you define three categories, as you can see in here. Category 1 is business, 2 non-business, and 3rd blocked. Very self-explanatory. If you put any connector in the blocked category, that connector cannot be used at all. But for the business and non-business, it works a little differently. So let's take a look at here at the examples. For example, if we have a Power Automate flow where we combine Dataverse connector and SQL connector, you see that the SQL one is in the non-business and Dataverse is in the business. It doesn't match. They need to be in the same flow. Inside the same flow, they need to be both in the business or the non-business side of things in the category. And for example, here in the second example, Dataverse and SharePoint, it's okay because they are both in the business. It would be the same if we had, for example, a flow that uses SQL and Salesforce because they are in the non-business. So then it has a match inside the flow, a flow level. And again, a DLP applies to a certain environment. So it's not global to all the organization. And that's why we want to understand how to combine on how to apply them into different environments. All right, so how can we combine DLP policies? And why is that important? First, why is that important? Because we want to have an easy way to manage connectors at scale across all our organization. If we have lots and lots of environments, a couple dozen environments, even it's important to have a proper DLP strategy, and that includes how to combine them effectively. And trust me, you need to read the documentation in detail because you can introduce quite a mess if you combine them in the wrong way. To understand how that works, the first rule of gold, let's say, is blocking always wins. Basically, let's take a look at this example over here. We have an environment, okay, environment XYZ, and we have two DLPs, DLP1, DLP2, that apply to this environment. Now, in the business, and didn't bother to put the non-business. In the business, we have Dataverse in here, and in the second DLP, Office 365 users. And in the blocked, Gmail, Google Mail, and Dataverse for DLP2. What's the result? Blocking always wins. So because we are applying two DLPs at the same time for the same environment, the result is basically that none of these connectors, not Dataverse nor Gmail, can be used in this environment. However, then the only connector that can be used is Office 365 users. Now let's take a look at this link to the documentation that I provide. I want you to read actually. Let me show it to you. All right, so in this link you'll see a very thorough documentation on how to combine DLP policies, and especially the case here is around business and non-business. I didn't include that in the tips because it's material for another video. And if you want to know more about that, let me know in the comments or contact me directly via my website because there's a lot of fat to trim here and a lot to understand. And then it's very hard to debug. Now with managed environments, it's a lot easier. But if you're not using managed environments, then you need to be very careful what you are combining. Now, second tip I want to share with you, and is the next logical conclusion is if blocking always wins, if I have an all blocked company policy, all company block policy. What that means is what we want to do is ensure that certain connectors cannot be used at all in any environment, no matter what happens. For example, Google Mail, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever. Then how can we approach this? Basically, step one is put all connectors in the business side, or maybe the other way around, but in the end, block only the connectors you want to block. The rest of them go to the business. business category, and then when you apply the DLP, you mark it to apply it all environments. It's important. Really, the important thing is that that we set the rest of the connectors that are not to be blocked in the business category, because otherwise we're going to introduce some conflicts, as you will find out if you read the documentation. Now let's take a look at how to build a DLP real quick. Basically, let's put here this DLP. We go from this is the old admin center. You can turn it on, the new one here. For DLP creation, still use this one. Um, then, well, give it a name, meaningful name. Then here you'll see that all connectors will be in the non-business by default. What we would do is put them all in the business side. And then, for example, say, okay, now you, for instance, uh, RSS and OneDrive for Business, they should go, whoops, the other way around. They should go to blocked. No, they cannot be for block because they are standard connectors from Microsoft, non-blockable. You see here, this one can be blocked. Let's give it back to business. Things from the live session. So all the ones that you want to have in the blocked policy should be here. And then another recommendation would be, what about the default group? So any new connectors that are added to that, let's say not the store, but the connectors available for you when you create a Power Automate flow, for instance, what happened with those? Well, I recommend that for the all blocked policy, you set them as blocked as well. Why? Any new connector is a risk for us as administrators because we have not tested it. We don't know what it is used for. For example, new GPT, ChatGPT connector or custom connectors from around. We don't want to allow them at all. And if it's needed, then users will raise a request, and then that will be routed to our processes that we, as admins at Power Platform Governance, we will have a process to decide whether we want to allow a connector or not, or maybe just in certain environments, depending on what's the environment strategy at organizational level. So there's a lot of things to talk about when we talk governance and DLPs, but you get the idea. So basically, the recommendation would be all to blocked, and then we will see what to do with a new connector if it's really needed by the business. And it doesn't suppose a risk, of course. All right, so to sum up, we've seen how DLPs work and why we need them as Power Platform admins to ensure data security in our organization. And then we saw 2 tips on how to combine DLPs. Well, how blocking always wins, and then how to configure an all company blocked policy to block throughout all the tenant the unwanted connectors. And that's that. Please leave me a comment, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and let me know in the comments or contact me directly over my website if you want to know more or just discuss about the topic. Thanks, and see you in the next one.